The sun dipped below the horizon. The sky was awash in hues of orange and purple. The salty air hung heavy over the small coastal town. Ailul stepped off the bus, her heart pounding. She hadn't been back in years. The town was quiet, almost eerily so. It felt frozen in time, a stark contrast to the bustling city she now called home. She saw Deniz leaning against his old beat-up truck. He hadn't changed much. His eyes still held the same warmth, even if his smile didn't reach them entirely. "Ailul," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "You made it." There was an unspoken tension between them, a residue of their last encounter years ago. "It's good to be back," she lied, her voice barely above a whisper. The drive to Deniz's house was filled with awkward silences. Ailul tried to with the weight of the past, focusing on the familiar landscape rushing by. The crashing waves, the scent of salt and seaweed, it all brought back a flood of childhood memories. Memories she had tried hard to forget. The old lighthouse stood on a craggy cliff overlooking the sea. It had been a constant presence in their lives, a silent guardian watching over the town. Ailul remembered lazy afternoons spent exploring its dusty interior with Deniz, their laughter echoing through the empty rooms. "They're tearing it down," Deniz said, breaking the silence. He leaned against his truck, his gaze fixed on the lighthouse. Ailul felt a pang in her chest. "What? Why?" "It's old, Ailul. Useless. They're building a new marina. Modern. Profitable." She could hear the bitterness in his voice. He might have resigned himself to the town's fate, but she refused to. The lighthouse was a symbol of their shared past, a beacon of hope in the often turbulent sea of their lives. She couldn't let them destroy it. "We have to save it, Deniz," she said, her voice firm. Deniz scoffed. "Save it? How? You think sentimentality will stop progress? It's not just sentimentality, it's history, it's beauty, it's..." Her voice cracked. "It's our lighthouse." Deniz turned away, his jaw clenched. He didn't understand. He had never understood her need to cling to the past. The storm hit as night fell. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows of the lighthouse. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the outside world. Inside, the air was thick with tension. "It's no use," Deniz yelled, his voice barely audible above the storm. "The generator is gone. We can't get the light working." They had been at it for hours, trying to fix the old electrical system. Ailul refused to give up. She climbed the rusted ladder to the lamp room, her heart pounding. The lighthouse, their last shared haven, was falling apart around them, just like their friendship all those years ago. "There has to be another way," she muttered, pushing aside cobwebs and dust. The room was dark, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. She stumbled over a box, its contents spilling onto the floor. An old oil lamp rolled to her feet. "Ailul, it's too dangerous. We have to go." Deniz's voice echoed from below. She ignored him. She had come too far to give up now. With trembling hands, she filled the lamp with oil and lit the wick. A warm glow filled the room. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The light flickered at first, threatened by the howling wind that whipped through the cracks in the walls, but it held strong, a beacon of defiance against the fury of the storm. Ailul watched it, her heart swelling with a mix of hope and relief. Below, Deniz stared at the beam cutting through the darkness. He couldn't believe it. She had actually done it. He felt a grudging admiration for her stubbornness, her refusal to let go. Maybe that was what had drawn him to her all those years ago. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Ailul smiled, her face illuminated by the flickering light of the oil lamp. "We did it," she corrected him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. For the first time in years, the tension between them eased. They worked together, side by side, securing the lamp and making sure the light stayed on. The storm raged outside, but inside the lighthouse, a different kind of storm was brewing. A storm of emotions, long suppressed, now threatening to break free. Dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sense of fragile peace. Ailul and Deniz stood on the balcony of the lighthouse, watching the sun rise over the vast expanse of the sea. The air was fresh, cleansed by the rain. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, their roar a soothing melody after the violence of the storm. Ailul took a deep breath, the salty air filling her lungs. She felt a sense of calm she hadn't realized she'd been missing. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the night's exertions. Denys nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt so at peace. The storm, the struggle to save the lighthouse, it had broken down the walls he'd built around himself. "We did good," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Ailul turned to look at him, her eyes searching his. "We did," she agreed, a small smile playing on her lips. The storm had tested them, pushed them to their limits, but it had also brought them closer than they had been in years. The decision to stay wasn't easy. Ailul had built a life for herself in the city, a life far removed from the quiet rhythms of her coastal hometown. But as she stood there, watching the waves crash against the shore, she knew she couldn't leave. Not again. The lighthouse needed her. This town, her past, it all needed her. And maybe, just maybe, she needed it too. She needed the sense of belonging, the connection to something bigger than herself that she found here. "I'm staying," she announced, her voice firm. Denys turned to look at her, his eyes wide with surprise. "Staying? Yes. I'm going to fight for the lighthouse. For this town." Denys didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stared at her, his gaze intense. She could see the questions swirling in his eyes, the doubts, the fears, but she could also see a flicker of hope, a spark that mirrored her own. They spent the next few days cleaning up the lighthouse, repairing the damage caused by the storm and years of neglect. As they worked, they talked. Really talked for the first time in years. They shared stories, laughed at old jokes, and reminisced about their shared past. Ailul learned about Denys's life in the town, his struggles to keep his family's fishing business afloat. Denys listened as she spoke about her life in the city, her dreams, her disappointments. The years melted away, the pain and resentment fading with each passing hour. One evening, as they were clearing debris from the base of the lighthouse, they stumbled upon a box filled with their childhood treasures. Old photographs, seashells, a tattered map of the island they had made together when they were kids. As they sat there, surrounded by the remnants of their shared history, a comfortable silence fell between them. It wasn't the awkward silence of their first meeting, filled with unspoken tension. This silence was different. It was the silence of understanding, of shared history, of a bond reforged. The sun began its final descent, casting long shadows across the water. Ailul and Denys climbed the winding staircase of the lighthouse, their footsteps echoing in the quiet air. They reached the top just as the sky exploded in a riot of colors. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Ailul leaned against the railing, gazing out at the endless horizon. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, a feeling of coming home. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs below. "For what?" Denys asked, his gaze fixed on her. "For everything. For reminding me who I am, for helping me find my way back." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "You never really left, Ailul. You just needed a little push to remember where you belonged." As they stood there, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, the past felt far away. The hurt, the anger, it all faded into insignificance. All that mattered was the present moment, the two of them standing together, facing the future with a newfound hope. The lighthouse's light swept across the water, a steady beam cutting through the gathering darkness. Ailul watched it, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. The lighthouse was no longer just a relic of the past, a symbol of bygone days. It was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found. She had found her light. In the crashing waves, the salty air, the enduring strength of the old lighthouse, she had found a piece of herself that she thought was lost forever. And in Denys, her childhood friend, she had found a kindred spirit, someone who understood her in a way no one else ever had. As the darkness deepened and the stars began to appear in the night sky, Ailul knew that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Home.